Chapter 15. Someone knocked on our door around 8 p.m., and when I looked through the peephole, I was almost positive I'd see Beardo with his sword pointed straight at me. Dad and Brady were in their rooms, so I was bracing myself for death. Instead, it was Aunt Nancy, and for a second the world was lollipops and rainbows. "Why, good evening, Javier. Is Wiki with you?" she asked sweetly, though she always wore an impish smile. "Hey, Aunt Nancy. We were at the library until late. I think he said he was going straight home after that?" She nodded. "Oh, that's right. I think his mom mentioned that. Thanks, Javi." She waved and turned to go, but as I was closing the door, she pointed a finger to the air. "Oh, I just remembered. I've been meaning to get that mofongo recipe from you. I'm thinking of making it for a little get-together tomorrow. Would you mind writing it out for me?" "Think about cooking instead of bloodthirsty pirates gutting me? Yes, please." I opened the door wide and motioned for her to come in. "My absolute pleasure, Aunt Nancy." We walked to the kitchen, and I dug through the kitchen drawers for a pen and pad while she took a nice long look around the living room and kitchen. "There's something different about this house," she said, her eyes going from the couches to the bookshelves to the kitchen table. "Aha!" She patted Andy, and Andy purred. I dropped my pen and looked over at her nervously, but she didn't seem to hear it. "This is a magnificent piece of furniture," she said, as she inspected the patterns carved into Andy's sides. She shook the table. "Solid, too. Where did you acquire this beauty?" I plopped on the chair next to her to write the recipe. "Oh, man. Dad takes us to so many antique stores and flea markets, I lose track. This one was far away, kind of in the middle of nowhere." Aunt Nancy was lost in thought for a minute. I scribbled down the ingredients. "How many people are you cooking for?" I asked. "Oh, just 4 of us." She tapped on the recipe as I scribbled. "Remember the version of mofongo we had a month ago? You experimented with some spices on it. That's the one I want to make." "Oh, yeah. That might have been my all-time best. What spice was that?" I got up to check the spice rack as Aunt Nancy kept studying the table. "Javi, I think you finally have a table worthy of your skills," she said. "That's an important step in any chef's journey." She walked over to the spice rack, but stopped in front of the fridge where Dad had posted my A++ essay. She picked it up and skimmed it as I went from spice to spice. Not coriander, not nutmeg. I used garlic in everything. "It makes me happy to see you write about something so passionately," she said. "Ginger. It was just ginger. But next time I'm planning to mix the plantains with yucca. I've heard that's a killer combo. You could try that too." She smiled and nodded, and then I realized she had complimented me. "Oh, thanks," I blushed. "Probably the first time Javi the Stomach gets a decent grade in all of 6th grade." She furrowed her brow, walked up to me, and looked me straight in the eye. You don't yet see it, do you?" She lifted my chin up to really study my eyes. It felt like she was rummaging around in my soul. "See what?" I yelped. "You will soon," she said, turning to the table, grabbing the recipe, and making her way to the door. "You will soon." As she opened the door to let herself out, she held up the recipe. "Ginger it is. Bring over some of the yucca mofongo when you make it, or invite me over to dine on your distinguished new table. I'm glad you found one worthy of your talents." She closed the door behind her, and for some reason, everything in my life felt good for a solid 3 minutes. Chapter 16. I had some pretty weird dreams that night. I was the captain of a giant rubber ducky I'd named Quacky's Revenge, and I was sailing it through the Sea of Tub, which I'm pretty sure was just a giant bathtub. Then Blackbeard showed up in an enormous pirate ship built of beard hair and poked my ducky with his sword, deflating it. "Quacky, no!" I yelled as we sank to the bottom of the sea and got sucked down a giant drain. "Quacky!" I screamed as I shot up in bed the next morning. "Quacky?" Brady asked, poking her head in my door. "You get weirder every day." Then she went downstairs. "Great start to the day, Javi," I mumbled to myself as I got out of bed. "Fantastic start. A+. Then I noticed the voices downstairs. Women's voices. For a second I thought Mom had come home early, but none of the voices were even semi-recognizable. I walked to the dining room slowly, not sure what to expect, and when I made it there, I saw one of the most bizarre scenes I'd ever witnessed. Sitting around the table were Brady and two other women chit-chatting as they ate scones and drank tea. They were clearly summoned by Andy because neither looked like they belonged in our century. One of them I was unsure about, but the second one was obviously Cleopatra, Brady said. Rosa Parks. This is my brother Javi. Javi, these are the two awesomest women in history. They must have nodded hello, but I was too busy yelling, Brady, are you bananas? We're not supposed to use Andy. Relax, bro. I'm not inviting pirates and murderers. You got to invite your 3 favorites to dinner. I just thought I'd invite my 3 to breakfast. 3? I only saw 2. Then I noticed that Brady was petting something under the table. A dog. Why did that dog look so familiar? Brady, is that Fluffers? Yep. Isn't he even fluffier than he seems on TV? That's Fluffers? I asked, my eyes saucers. As in the president's dog, Fluffers? You stole the president of the United States' dog? She glared at me. I invited him, Javi. He's a guest. The fluffiest guest ever, aren't you, Fluffers? Aren't you? She cooed, tickling his chin. Then she glared at me again. It's just for an hour. Also, you don't think Cleopatra and Rosa Parks are more impressive than a pet? Do you know what our lives would be like if Rosa Parks hadn't existed? You let your brother talk to you like this? Cleopatra asked, scowling at me. Not usually, she said. Don't worry, he's afraid of me. Good, she said, smiling regally. Remember what I told you, Brady. You are a queen. I know a queen when I see one, and you are a queen. That's for sure, Rosa Parks said. Want some scones, Javi? There's plenty to go around. I scratched my neck awkwardly. Thanks, but I'm good. Nice to meet you both, by the way. Hey, Brady, we're going to be late for school. Education is the most important thing, Rosa Parks said, especially for a future queen, Cleopatra added. Ugh, fine, Javi. Well, I'll invite you ladies for a follow-up lunch soon, Brady said brightly. Thanks for hanging out. I walked back upstairs as they all said their goodbyes, and then I heard the bell ring. Wow, would Wiki be furious if he found out? No way I was telling him. I went to my room to get dressed, and when I shut the door, I saw it for the first time. A big, dirty knife was stabbed into the inside of my bedroom door. It was holding up a note that said, Your uniform today, or else. Behind it were the rubber ducky PJs Abuela gifted me for my birthday. Brady, I yelled, this is a truly sick prank. She walked into my room. Prank? I wish I'd played a prank on you. I can't believe how rude you were to my guests. She glanced over at the knife, then walked up and took a long look at it. No, that's definitely Blackbeard's knife. I recognize it from dinner. He's got pretty fancy handwriting for a pirate, don't you think? I screamed so loud I should have fainted. Javi, relax, Brady yelled. Deep breaths, okay? We're going to be late for school. Wiki's going to be here any minute, and we have a lot to talk about. Like the fact that Blackbeard broke into my room last night? I asked between screams. Guess who's never sleeping in their bed again? This guy. I poked my finger into my chest. If he tried to sneak into my room, Brady muttered, balling her hands into fists, this whole thing would have been over. Bam! She did a few karate punches while I pulled the knife out of the door. I picked up the PJs from the floor. They were even more humiliating than I remembered. Today was going to be the worst. So, there are no signs of a break-in? Wiki asked as we walked to school that morning, worried, but also trying his best not to laugh at me. None, said Brady, also snickering. He didn't touch Andy, and the bell is safe. Honestly, if he hadn't planted his knife in the door, we wouldn't even know someone had been in there. He truly is the king of psychological warfare, Wiki said, clearly impressed. I can't imagine a worse thing to do to a middle schooler. Thanks, Wiki, I grumbled. You could have worn your normal clothes, Brady said. He would have just challenged you to a friendly duel at recess. To the death, of course. She and Wiki broke into hysterical laughter. I'd like to say that it was nice to hear them laughing after so many serious days, but it wasn't at all. I just gritted my teeth and soldiered on. School started exactly like I expected it to. First period Spanish was the worst. Buddy Grimes called me El Ducko the whole time. The class couldn't stop laughing, and Senor Q didn't even do anything to shut him up. To add to the nightmare, my secret crush Sarah was in that class. She didn't full-on laugh at me, but she did grimace a few times. Once we started our assignment, Senor Q asked me to come to his desk. Ese no es un nene, ese es un monstruo, Javier, he said. That's not a kid, that's a monster. He liked that we could talk Spanish to each other, and usually that would mean we'd have a classic teacher-student friendship, but Q was strange even by Finister's standards. Saying that he had an active imagination would be putting it mildly. You need to put on your armor, grab your sword, and defeat the monster, he said very seriously in Spanish. You would think that that'd be a good pep talk, but Q wasn't trying to tell me to be brave. He literally thought I owned armor and a sword and I should wear them. And he probably believed that Grimes was a bona fide monster. Okay, Senor Q, I'll bring my armor next time. Buenísimo, he said, clapping me on the back. Mi hero. Yeah, right, like I was anyone's hero. Miss Vlad was next, and it wasn't an improvement. She raised an eyebrow when I walked into class 2 seconds after the bell, and everyone noticed my get-up and laughed. Then, while she went to the printer room to get our homework, Grimes stood on his chair and said, I want to suck your ducks, in his best Dracula impression. The class went into hysterics, and even though I should have been embarrassed, I was actually terrified. Everyone always made fun of my Vlad vampire theory, but not in the middle of class. I was 95% sure Vlad was going to chomp Grimes's neck in a vampiric rage and turn him full bloodsucker in front of all of us, but the class had settled down by the time she returned. Art was third, and it was a little bit better. Ms. Calderon has zero patience for bullying or meanness of any kind. When I walked into class, she looked me up and down and gave me a thumbs up. I am impressed, Javier, she said, nodding. Finally, you are starting to let your fashion sense show. She pointed over to our easels. And your timing is perfect. We begin our self-portraits today. Miss Calderon was my favorite teacher. Wiki liked her too, but for completely different reasons. I loved that she was a real artist. When we painted, she painted, and she was so into it. She thought about painting the same way I thought about cooking. It was something you worked hard at, but it didn't feel like work, and it was worth it anyway because the final product was so awesome. She was also super creative and really encouraged us to find our own styles. No art was bad art if it was true to your style. That's how I felt about cooking, mostly. Wiki dug her because she was secretly tough as nails. You barely saw it because usually Miss Calderon was super sweet, but no one even dreamed of messing with her. I was pretty sure that she was a warrior by night and she would one day train Brady in the ways of butt kicking. A few of the girls in class started quacking at me as we started painting, but Miss C gave them one of her signature looks and they shut up immediately. Part of Miss C's toughness comes from her eyes. She has such an intense stare when she's painting or talking about painting that I think it's going to light the canvas on fire. The other kids make fun of it behind her back, but I think it's kind of awesome and the root of her powers. I remember when we were finishing each other's portraits one day and she talked about how your eyes should pierce the painting. The other kids laughed, but I dug it. A self-portrait isn't just about painting yourself, she said as she walked around the room. It is about painting your presence, your essence, what makes you unique, whether you illustrate it in the expression, the lighting, the objects, or landscapes surrounding you. She nodded as she passed by each kid's painting. We need to expand our search, Wiki whispered to me. We were painting next to each other. I'm not sure my pirate research surfaced anything useful. We need a new approach. I glanced at his self-portrait, which looked like a stick figure. Wiki was a genius, but a lousy artist. Okay, let's see, I whispered when Miss Calderon was on the other side of the room. Maybe we study things that sailors are scared of? Ooh, we could use Andy to summon a giant squid. Wiki made a face. I'm picturing a giant squid slithering around helplessly in your kitchen. Ew, that's disgusting. He shook his head. No, I was thinking about the other defining aspect of Blackbeard. He's a pirate, but he's also technically a chrononaut. A chrononaut? Wow, just realized I'm starving. I licked my lips. A chrononaut, a time traveler. I mean, I don't know exactly how Andy functions, but regardless, there are a lot of things Blackbeard won't understand about the modern world, and I bet technology will scare him. We can use that to our advantage. 30 minutes later, Wiki had proven his point. We were at library class in the dumpy middle school library. Picture a boring school library. Yep, that's it. It's nothing like the magical high school library. We were trying to research time travel, but this library only had books that were middle school level or below, so we weren't finding much. Blackbeard was sitting at the computers 20 feet away from us, and the middle school librarian was helping him figure out what he was doing. Wow, I can't believe you want to spend your weekends building a puppy petting area for the kids, she swooned. You really are as big-hearted as they say. The librarian's eyes looked like they could have had little cartoon hearts in them. I groaned quietly. Yes, anything for the, kids. They are our, future, Blackbeard mumbled, clearly trying not to throw up in his mouth as he said it. Now, is this the compass, then? He asked, waving the mouse in the air and shaking it. It doesn't seem to be working. I don't see true north. Your compass is broken. The librarian shook her head. That's not a compass. It's a very small telescope. Yes, I see that now. I don't see the hole. He put the mouse up to his eye. Oh, no, I'm mistaken. This is clearly a tiny anchor. He tossed it onto the floor, then shook his head and looked at her. This is a very low-quality anchor. I suggest you invest in better anchors. I was trying my hardest not to laugh. Why are all the teachers here so bad at technology? The librarian muttered under her breath as she put the mouse back on the table and explained computers to Mr. Teach. He started trying to order the monitor around like it was one of his crew. I have to sit somewhere else, I wheezed, or I'm going to explode. Wiki held it together better than I did. As funny as this is, we're still watching him gather information for world domination. He looked over at me. But this does confirm my suspicion. We can use a version of the Columbus eclipse approach. You know I have no idea what that is, I said, looking down at the table so I wouldn't laugh at Beardo. Christopher Columbus once used his knowledge of an upcoming eclipse to fool the indigenous people into thinking God stole the sun because he was mad at them. Columbus predicted the sun's vanishing to their chief, and it terrified them. Really, he just read about it in an almanac. Wow, that guy really was the worst. But your point is, there are 1,000 ways we can use technology to scare someone from the 1700s. We're talking about pre-industrial revolution times. Even a telephone or car is news to them. I nodded. Wiki did have a point. Okay, give me some time to come up with a plan, he said. He did some mental calculations in his head, then noticed something behind me. Hey, Javi, check it out. Looks like we're not the only Blackbeard haters. I turned around, and sitting in a corner of the library with a newspaper in his lap was none other than Mr. Scrimshaw, and he had a death stare aimed right at everyone's favorite pirate. Finally, someone who sees through him. I wanted to walk over and high-five him right then and there, but he already thought I was weird enough. Still, it was good to know that one teacher in this school had common sense. The day was finally looking up, when a bunch of girls leaving the library whispered, "Quack you later, loser." Gym was last period. Right before the bell rang, I was putting away the kickball in the storage room when I heard someone behind me. The way the hairs stood up on my neck, I knew exactly who it was. "Day 2, Blackbeard said darkly as he pretended to mop the floor. Instead of my usual terrified self, I was actually mad. "This is a low blow, even for you. Why didn't you make Brady wear some dumb PJs too?" "And upset the future queen of pirates? Never," Blackbeard smiled. "But please, never wear that to school again. It's even worse than I imagined." "I wasn't planning on it." Then in 1 second his face went from weird smile to violent frown. "Enough! I grow impatient. Do you have the bell or not?" In 1 second I went from angry Javi to petrified bunny rabbit. We have one more day. Today is the last day I asked nicely, and if I don't get it by the end of the school day tomorrow, He walked off without finishing his thought. Not like he had to, anyway. "Wickie!" I yelled, running to catch him in the halls. He'd better have come up with a solid plan, or we were going to have to rethink this whole not giving Blackbeard the bell thing.